Maybe next year you'll be good enough, Mom said coldly after forgetting my son's Christmas gift. I cut them off. Weeks later, they stood on the porch, sobbed. I never thought I'd be completely cutting my family out of my life. But sometimes people show you who they really are, and you have to believe them. For me, that moment of clarity came during what should have been a joyful Christmas morning, when my 6-year-old son Curtis learned a painful lesson about where he stood in his grandparents' eyes. Growing up as the eldest son in the Martinez family, I'd always been the responsible one. My younger brother Troy was the golden child, charismatic, outgoing, and perpetually in need of rescuing. While my parents funded Troy's education at a prestigious private university, I worked night shifts to put myself through community college. I spent years telling myself that was just how families worked. The dynamics are never perfectly fair. Even when my wife Melissa pointed out the disparity in how my parents treated us versus how they treated Troy, I brushed it off. They're from a different generation, I'd say. They show love in their own way. When Curtis was born, I genuinely believed things might change. Surely my parents would see this innocent child as deserving of the same love and attention they lavished on Troy's kids. Melissa was skeptical, but I insisted on giving them the chance to be better grandparents than they had been parents. They're going to hurt Curtis eventually, Melissa warned me one night after my parents had forgotten Curtis's birthday yet remembered to send elaborate gifts to Troy's children the following week. It's only a matter of time. I didn't want to believe her. Family was family, and I wanted Curtis to have what I never did, grandparents who valued him. The annual Martinez family Christmas gathering was held at my parents' sprawling suburban home. They'd gone all out with decorations, a 12-foot tree adorned with ornaments collected over decades, garlands draped across the banister, and lights twinkling from every possible surface. The house smelled of cinnamon and pine, and Christmas music played softly in the background. Curtis was vibrating with excitement as we arrived. At 6, he was fully immersed in the magic of Christmas, and he'd been counting down the days. He bounded into the house, giving quick hugs to his grandparents before joining his cousins near the massive pile of gifts under the tree. The gift-opening ceremony had always been a production in my family. My mother insisted everyone watch as each person opened their presents to properly appreciate the thought that went into each selection. We gathered in the living room, the adults with coffee or mimosas, the children fidgeting with anticipation. My father started the distribution, calling out names and handing over beautifully wrapped packages. Troy's oldest received the latest gaming console, his middle child a tablet, and his youngest a handcrafted dollhouse that must have cost a small fortune. Troy himself was given a sleek new laptop, for your business ventures, my father said proudly, and his wife received a designer watch. Melissa and I were handed department store gift cards, $50 each, the plastic cards tucked into generic Christmas cards with no personal message. I felt the familiar sting but smiled politely. This was nothing new. Then came the moment that would permanently alter our family. My father looked at his list, called out every remaining name, and sat back down. Curtis, sitting cross-legged on the floor with an empty lap, looked confused. He glanced around at his cousins, who were busy examining their bounty. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Curtis, in his small, innocent voice, asked the question that broke my heart. "Grandma, did Santa forget my present at your house?" My mother's response came without hesitation, her voice cool and dismissive. "Gifts are for those who earn them, Curtis. Maybe next year you'll be good enough." The room fell silent. Even Troy looked uncomfortable, quickly busying himself with adjusting the settings on his new laptop. Curtis's eyes widened, his lower lip beginning to tremble as he processed his grandmother's words. "But I was good," he whispered, tears pooling in his eyes. "I did all my chores and helped Mom with the dishes and—" "That's enough, Curtis," my mother interrupted. "Don't make a scene. Why don't you go play with your cousin's toys? I'm sure they'll share." Something inside me, something that had been bending for 35 years, finally snapped. I crossed the room in 3 strides, scooping Curtis into my arms. He buried his face in my neck, his small body shaking with silent sobs. "How could you do this to a 6-year-old child?" My voice was low, controlled, but vibrating with fury. "What kind of person deliberately hurts a child on Christmas?" My father waved his hand dismissively. "Don't make such a big deal out of nothing, Michael. Curtis needs to learn that the world doesn't revolve around him. Not everyone gets a trophy just for showing up." "He's 6 years old," I replied, my arms tightening protectively around Curtis. He's a child who believed his grandparents loved him. Melissa was already gathering our coats, her face a mask of barely controlled rage. She'd been right all along, and I'd been a fool to expose Curtis to this toxic environment. This isn't something you can take back, I said, looking my parents in the eyes. We're done. Do not contact us again. The drive home was quiet except for Curtis's occasional sniffles. In the rearview mirror, I could see him staring out the window, his Christmas joy thoroughly extinguished. Did I do something bad, Dad? He asked finally, his voice small and uncertain. No, buddy, I replied, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. You did nothing wrong, Grandma and Grandpa. They have problems that have nothing to do with you. They don't know how to be good grandparents. But why don't they like me? The simple question nearly undid me. Melissa reached back and took Curtis's hand. Sometimes people are so caught up in their own problems that they can't see how wonderful others are, she explained gently. It's their loss, because you are the most amazing boy in the world. The text started before we even reached home. My mother, you're overreacting as usual. My father, your behavior was embarrassing and childish. Troy, dude, just calm down and call them. You know how Mom is. I blocked their numbers, then wrote a brief email outlining our position. No contact until they acknowledged what they had done and offered a sincere apology to Curtis. They responded with excuses, deflections, and accusations. They conveniently forgot to address the central issue, their deliberate cruelty toward Curtis. We created new holiday traditions in the following days. Melissa's family stepped up, showering Curtis with love and reassurance. Friends invited us to their celebrations. We volunteered at a local shelter on New Year's Day, helping Curtis understand that family isn't just about blood relations. It's about who shows up for you when it matters. Just over a week into the new year, the doorbell rang on a Sunday afternoon. Curtis was at a friend's birthday party, and Melissa was catching up on work in her home office. I peered through the peephole and felt a surge of anger. My parents stood on the porch, looking notably disheveled. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, and my father's normally impeccable appearance was rumpled. Against my better judgment, I opened the door but remained firmly in the doorway, blocking their entry. "Michael, thank goodness," my mother began, her voice trembling. "We've been trying to reach you." I was clear about my boundaries, I replied coldly. "What do you want?" My father, looking older than I'd ever seen him, stepped forward. "Son, we're in trouble. It's Troy. He's gone." Over the next few minutes, they unveiled a story that would have shocked me if I hadn't spent a lifetime watching them enable Troy's worst behaviors. Apparently, he had systematically emptied their accounts over the past month. Their retirement savings, $280,000, gone. Credit cards maxed out. Even family heirlooms had disappeared, presumably pawned or sold online. Troy had vanished 3 days ago, leaving only a brief note saying he had a business opportunity, abroad that couldn't wait. No apology, no explanation for the theft, just the expectation that Mom and Dad would understand, as they always had. "We have nowhere else to go," my mother said, tears streaming down her face. "The bank is foreclosing on the house. Our utilities are being shut off tomorrow. We're still your parents, Michael. Family helps family in times of need." I stood frozen in the doorway, a storm of emotions battling within me. Part of me, the dutiful son I'd been programmed to be, felt their pain and wanted to help. But a stronger part remembered Curtis's tears, his confusion, his heartbreak at being deemed not good enough for even a token Christmas gift. "Where were you when Curtis needed grandparents?" I asked quietly. "Where was this family helps family philosophy when you deliberately excluded a 6-year-old from Christmas?" "This is different," my father insisted, his voice regaining some of its usual authoritative tone. "This is an actual crisis, not some childish disappointment over presents." "It wasn't about the presents," I said, feeling a calm clarity settle over me. "It was about you making a child feel worthless. It was about showing me exactly who you are and what you value." My mother's tears dried up remarkably quickly, replaced by the familiar look of disapproval I'd grown up with. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. The Bible says to honor your parents, Michael." "You made your choice at Christmas," I replied, beginning to close the door. "Curtis and I are making ours now. You'll regret this when we're gone," my father called as the door shut between us. "Blood is thicker than water." I leaned against the closed door, half expecting to feel guilt or uncertainty. Instead, I felt something unexpected: relief. For the first time in my life, I had placed my son's well-being above my parents' demands. The weight of decades of trying to earn their approval lifted from my shoulders. Unfortunately, their appearance at our door was just the beginning. 2 days later, they showed up at my workplace, creating a scene in the lobby that required security intervention. My boss, thankfully understanding after I explained the situation, implemented a visitor screening policy to prevent future disruptions. The following week brought an even more disturbing escalation. My phone rang during a meeting, Curtis's school. My mother had attempted to remove him from his classroom, claiming a family emergency. Thanks to our prior warning to the administration about potential custody issues, the front office had refused to release Curtis and had called me immediately. I filed a police report for attempted kidnapping that afternoon, my hands shaking with suppressed rage as I detailed the incident to a sympathetic officer. The reality of how far my parents might go to force their way back into our lives had hit home. This wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. This was about protecting Curtis from people who had proven themselves unsafe. The police visit apparently triggered something in my parents. Unable to reach us directly, they took their grievances public. Social media posts appeared, painting themselves as abandoned elderly parents whose ungrateful son had turned his back on them in their time of need. Strategic omissions and carefully worded sympathy baits soon had distant relatives and old family friends messaging me, questioning how I could be so heartless. I maintained my silence publicly while documenting everything privately. Each harassing phone call from a spoofed number, each manipulative message, each attempt to circumvent our boundaries was carefully recorded and added to the growing file my attorney was building for a potential restraining order. The breaking point came 3 weeks after their initial visit. My mother somehow obtained Melissa's personal cell number and called late one evening. "You've poisoned Michael against his family," she hissed when Melissa answered. "A real wife would encourage reconciliation, not division. A real grandmother wouldn't emotionally abuse her grandchild," Melissa replied calmly before ending the call. Minutes later, my phone rang, an unknown number that I answered on instinct, worried it might be related to work. "You listen to me, Michael," my mother's voice cut through before I could even say hello. "I am still your mother, and I demand the respect I deserve. If you don't start behaving like a proper son, I'll make sure Curtis knows exactly what kind of man his father really is." Something in her threat, the willingness to hurt Curtis again to get what she wanted, crystallized my resolve. I activated the call recording feature with a swipe. "You lost the right to call yourself a grandparent when you decided to hurt a 6-year-old, I said, my voice steady. "You lost the right to call yourself my mother when you attempted to abduct my son from his school. This is your final warning. Contact us again in any way, and I will pursue every legal option available to keep you away from my family." "You're ungrateful." I ended the call and blocked the number, then sat heavily on the edge of our bed. Melissa wrapped her arms around me without a word, her presence a silent confirmation that I had done the right thing. The next morning, after careful consideration and consultation with our attorney, I took action. I created a private social media post visible only to family members and those who had been contacting us about the situation. In it, I included the recording of my mother's threat, a redacted copy of the police report from the school incident, and a calm, factual account of the Christmas event that had started it all. "I'm sharing this not to escalate a family dispute, but to explain why we've made the difficult decision to cut contact," I wrote. "I would have preferred to handle this privately, but the ongoing harassment and public manipulation have made that impossible. My priority is protecting my son from further harm." The response was immediate and overwhelming. My mother's sister called to apologize, admitting she'd witnessed similar behavior over the years but had never had the courage to confront it. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years reached out with messages of support. Even my father's brother, who had always been firmly in the family above all camp, sent a brief message. "You did right by your boy. That's what matters." Most significantly, Melissa's brother Sean, who had remained neutral during the conflict, posted a public statement defending our decision. "Having witnessed the impact of this situation on my nephew firsthand, I fully support Michael and Melissa's actions to protect their son. Family should build you up, not tear you down." The public exposure achieved what private boundaries could not. The harassment stopped almost overnight. Through family grapevines, we heard my parents had moved in with a second cousin in another state. They made no attempt to apologize or acknowledge their actions. 6 months later, our family had found a new equilibrium. Curtis, with the help of a wonderful child therapist, had processed his feelings about his grandparents. "They're not very good at loving people," he explained to me one day with the simple wisdom of children. "It's sad for them because loving people is the best thing." We created new traditions to replace the old ones. We celebrated chosen family, friends who showed up consistently, who treated Curtis with the love and respect every child deserves. We learned together that boundaries aren't walls designed to punish, they're shields meant to protect. On Curtis's 7th birthday, surrounded by people who genuinely delighted in his joy, I watched him blow out his candles with a smile that reached his eyes. Melissa squeezed my hand, and I felt a profound certainty settle in my chest. This circle of authentic love and mutual respect was what family should feel like. Sometimes the hardest choices are also the clearest ones. Sometimes protecting those who depend on you means disappointing those who raised you. And sometimes, the family you choose creates a stronger foundation than the one you were born into. I don't know if I'll ever hear from my parents again. Part of me hopes they've found the capacity for genuine reflection and change. But a larger part of me has made peace with the reality that some relationships cannot and should not be salvaged, not when the cost is a child's sense of self-worth. Curtis deserves better, and now he knows that I'll always stand between him and anyone who suggests otherwise, even if that person shares our blood. In the end, that's what parenting is, a promise to protect even when it's difficult, even when it hurts, even when it means walking away from your past to secure your child's future.